Good morning, everybody. I'm actually very happy to be here the third time in a row, opening this great event with a keynote. This event is actually one of the top 5 events in EMEA when it comes to open source, and which we as Red Hat support. So I'm very glad that every year there are even more attendees. And today, I want to quickly talk about status of open source, go quickly through this, and then especially talk about the relevance, especially strategic relevance of open source in the cloud space. So let's quickly look at where is open source already used today, and where it got already established. There are 850,000 Android phones getting online daily. There are 700,000 TVs being produced daily. And over 90% of these 700,000 TVs have Linux included. There are millions of routers at your houses around the world which are using Linux. 8 out of 10 stock trades around the world, 8 out of 10 are powered by Linux and open source technology. 9 of the 10 supercomputers around the world, 9 of the 10, over 90%, are powered by Linux. 17, very interesting number. Microsoft became number 17th contributor to the latest version of the Linux kernel. If you think back just a few years, Steve Ballmer called Linux a cancer. From calling it a cancer to being number 17th contributor, I think is a big change. They just start to accept that it will not go away. 75% of the people working on Linux is salaried staff, meaning they are corporations who are paying the people to develop in the open source community. So it's not just hobbyists and students and so on, 75%. The last version of the kernel had contributions of 226 companies. Think about it, 226 companies were contributing to the last kernel. And when you see what happens on Linux, you have different companies. You probably cannot read this, but you have all the names. Red Hat, we are there the leader in terms of share of contribution to the Linux kernel, and then followed by like Intel, Novell, IBM, and others. So it is a real business. Because of this, whoever you talk to, be it IDC, be it Gartner, be it Forrester, all the analysts have a very clear prediction. There are 2 operating systems going forward, which is Microsoft Windows and which is Linux, period. 2 operating systems going forward, and it's like confirmed, and that's what we're also seeing in the market. Then when you look at these companies, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, Facebook would not exist without open source. It's now a company which is estimated to have a market cap of $60 to $100 billion, depending on how well the IPO goes. So without open source, they would not exist. Google uses open source as a strategic weapon to fight Apple. They created with Android, an operating system and creating an ecosystem with the hardware manufacturers, be it HTCs and so on, to fight off a big competitor who's Apple, using open source as a strategic weapon. So it's I think, very interesting. There are 354 official policies within governments for the use of open source, and half of them are a mandate or a strong recommendation. 354 official policies around the globe. Then Jerzy talked about Red Hat success being already a $1 billion company. So I don't want to go through the details, but what it means, it is a real business. So you also can make money with open source, which is very important. So my last slide is just evangelizing is over. We don't have to talk about this anymore. It is over evangelizing. It is here, open source technology, and it will stay here in the enterprise for the foreseeable future. So let's just stop about selling open source as a concept. So that's why I think this is the last conference where I will ever talk about what's the status, because it is everywhere. So with this, let me switch to clouds. and especially talk about the relevance of open source in clouds and what we think are the right concepts of a cloud strategy. Before I go there, there's a study from IDC, which was done within public organizations, and the question was asked, how many of the organizations are already using public cloud services? And actually it was 40% of the public organizations, this is actually from Germany, are using public cloud services. But the interesting with this is not the 40, the interesting part is that it grew from 20% to 40% within 1 year. The difference between 2010 and 2011. So like doubling in terms of the adoption of public cloud usage. Now when you look at the economies of public clouds, which is they're now very interesting where public clouds have tremendous efficiency, and public clouds services, they set kind of the expectation of the users within enterprises. So on one side you have a classical, enterprise customer, enterprise data center, where they're fighting with internal, complexity and legacy and so on, where it's much more expensive, for example, to provide a virtual machine hour, which is kind of 10 times the price of what the public cloud provider provides the machine for. Okay, so the public clouds set the expectation, but enterprise IT still has a lot of constraints. So the big question is, how can this gap be bridged, and deliver, kind of the service of a public cloud, for significant lower cost in kind of an enterprise fashion. When you look at public clouds who have been built, and the first public clouds who have been built, all running open source, be it Amazon, be it Salesforce.com, be it IBM, be it Entity Communication, and so on, all are built on open source technology and Linux. Interesting is that 80% of the applications running in public clouds run on Linux. In the data center, the Linux share is 22%, 20 to 22%. On the public cloud, it's already 80%, because there is no dependency on legacy. So whenever something comes new, it more or less goes default on Linux. So it's a very interesting point. Then all of these clouds are built on open source. They're built on x86 volume architectures, so really scale out architecture. It's on demand, it's multi-tenancy, it's high density. Open source, plays an absolute essential role in this. So now the big question is, how do I get the efficiency from a public cloud into a data center? Okay? Because a classical data center operates in silos, has many legacy systems, has a lot of complexity, and because of this, only a small portion of the IT budget gets spent for innovation. 75%, 80% of the money of the budget is spent for just keeping the lights on, just keep the systems running, but not spending the money on innovation. So the big question is, how can I get efficiency into this? And for us, right now, CIOs and enterprise architects have to make a strategic architectural decision which will last for the next decade or even more. We are right now at a clear paradigm shift in our industry, as big as the paradigm shift from going from the mainframe world to the client-server world. And right now, companies have to make architectural decisions, which set them up for the future, or maybe not setting them up for the future. So right now is the moment where everybody has to make these strategic architectural decisions. And in our opinion, there are 3 choices which a customers can make as an architectural decision for going forward with clouds. The first choice is throw everything away, start from scratch without having any dependency on the past, which is maybe a good concept, but not necessarily a concept for enterprise customers, because you cannot just throw away all your legacy. Where this concept is maybe okay, if you're a service provider, if you want to be your own public cloud provider where you can start from scratch and can build a complete clean architecture. Unfortunately, for the traditional enterprise IT, this is not even a choice. The second alternative is to build another silo, to build a cloud silo. This is actually the strategy proposed and pushed by VMware. So what do they recommend customers is say, take a piece of your infrastructure, take another silo, be it 10%, be it 20%, be it 30%, run the complete stack from one vendor, optimize it, make it efficient, and you get a lot of value out of it. But what you don't get is, you again locked in, you have another silo, and you're just using the efficiency in a portion of your enterprise. If you suddenly want to grow this tremendously, you cannot grow because you build up barriers, because it's another silo, and you're locked in because you are forced to use pretty much all the tools from one single vendor. So you did not really make it easier, maybe easier in the short term, but as soon as you want to grow further and also integrate with other public cloud providers and so on, you're kind of locked in. So what we are clearly proposing here is to build an open and hybrid cloud. What does this mean? First of all, it's essential that you include all your resources in your potential resource pool. When I say all resources, I'm talking about physical systems, virtualized systems, being virtualized with VMware, being virtualized with Microsoft, or being virtualized with Red Hat. With this, you have kind of 98% or 99% of the virtualization market within x86. Or last, be it resources from public cloud providers. Okay? So to include all of the potential resources in your resource pool, and then after this, you need to decide which share of this you want to offer as a cloud service to your clients. Okay? But not limiting yourself by just cutting one slice, really including all the resources, and especially leveraging then your existing investment. So you don't have to throw away investment in already your choice of hypervisor you made in the past. So when you look at this, the key takeaway is really to build an open cloud. When we talk about open means, on one side, it's based on open source. When you use open source technology, we all know the benefits. You have a community behind it, which is an independent community. It's all based on open standards, so different layers are replaceable. You have freedom to use IP, you have the choice of the infrastructure, you have an open API, and you have the portability. So all the advantages of open source in general also applies then to the cloud space. And the next one is, it's not just an open cloud, it needs to be a hybrid cloud. Because what is a clear trend is nobody will be able to suddenly push all the workloads out into a public cloud, okay? Or nobody wants to stay just internally. So for certain use cases, you have to have the capability to go out to a public cloud. So what is now essential for the architecture, from an architectural point of view, is that you have a consistent architecture on-premise and off-premise. Meaning that you very easily can move workloads from your in-house enterprise to a public cloud and vice versa, wherever you think it makes sense. We have a very interesting customer, financial services organization in the US, where they develop like new applications for their customers, for their consumers, in a public cloud environment, because they often don't know how it will go. So they develop in a platform as a service in the cloud, launch the application, launch the product. If it fails, it's not a big thing, because it fails. They just take down the service, and the cost of failure is relatively low. If it is a success, and and it grows, then they maybe say, oh, I don't want to have this anymore in the public cloud. I want to get more control. They pull it in-house, and then run it in-house. You just can do this if you have a consistent architecture on-premise and off-premise. And what is there essential, again, from the architecture perspective, that it is layered, meaning you can replace one layer, or you can replace each layer by different technology. For sure, we as Red Hat, we would love that you use all of our technology, okay? But you don't have to. It's a big, big difference. You talk to VMware, they force you into using their technology because it only works with all of their technologies, top to bottom. With us, you always have the choice because it's based on open source, it's based on open standards, and you can replace each layer depending on what you already have or what your preferred choice is. So again, there are 3 choices you have, for an architecture or for cloud architecture going forward is start from scratch, throwing everything away, not feasible for an enterprise customer. Second, build another cloud silo, which then again has the risk of being locked in again big time, or build an open hybrid cloud architecture, which really sets you up for the future and gives you all the flexibility. Because the future is still very fluid, meaning It is not decided yet who are the winners in this space. There's a lot of changes going on, and when you follow the market, you hear many names of companies or products, be it OpenStack or be it Red Hat or VMware and so on. Nobody knows exactly what the outcome is, besides for sure there will be still change. So you need to have a flexible architecture to succeed in this market. So with this, I just can say, open hybrid cloud is the future of enterprise architecture. With this, thank you very much for your attention.